What's going on, everybody? LK here, back at it again with another video, and today some Guilty Gear Strive for y'all. So you may have noticed earlier this week, but ArcSys is starting a new series called the Developer's Backyard, where they're posting notes about developing Guilty Gear, and they started by responding to the feedback that we all sent after the closed beta. So I haven't looked at it yet. I'm going to be pretty much looking at it live with you guys, but I'm basically going to be going over it, seeing what they say, just adding some of my own commentary. If you like this video or any of the other videos I put out, I encourage you to like this video or subscribe, or do both. It does help the channel grow and I'd really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. So let's start from the top. The first question that they asked was, what is everyone's favorite fighting games? A lot of people said they played Guilty Gear before, 95%, that's a lot of people, and 54% said that Guilty Gear series was their favorite fighting game. Not that much of a surprise. It wasn't like easy to get a beta code. Like, the main ways you could get one is that if you went to one of the offline Guilty Gear events that gave you a code, that guaranteed you a code. So for example, Frosty Faustings in the US had that. I believe Evo Japan had that. There's probably a couple other events that gave you guaranteed codes as well. Besides that, you had to sign up for a beta code and just basically hope that you would get it. So I'm not surprised that most of the people who played Guilty Gear Strive had at least tried Guilty Gear before and really enjoyed the series. Most used character, also not that much of a surprise, right? Soul Bad Guy is the main character, right? Kai Kisuke is also another one of the main characters. They both are pretty easy, and they both also play pretty similarly to their old versions as well. Obviously there are changes that are unique to Strive, a bunch of changes between like how moves work, how some of the Gatlings or target combos, whatever you want to call them, work, changes their special moves in general, stuff like that. And then third was Mei. That's who I used pretty much like 80% of the time. And that's another one who, and I know someone's going to come at me for saying it, she's mostly the same, pretty familiar. There are changes to a bunch of her moves and stuff, but it's mostly what I'm used to seeing from Mei. So it doesn't really surprise me that those three characters were the most common compared to like let's say like Faust has a lot of new stuff. Axel, even though it's still like Axel at a base, he has a bunch of new stuff. And I mean, Axel in general is usually pretty uncommon anyway. So these three are not too surprising. So next is the most requested character, and I think this is pretty funny. This is the first thing I saw from this article on Monday on Twitter. In Japan, it's Bridget and Johnny and Ramphel. Those are the top three. In every other region, it's Baiken, Johnny, and Dizzy. In every other region. Especially Baiken being number one. So 95% of people said they played Guilty Gear before, but then everyone wants Baiken. That tells me that these people are not all super serious about Guilty Gear. It's what a normal Guilty Gear player would say. I actually don't care if they add Baiken. Baiken is a perfect character to show how selfish Guilty Gear players about their characters. Because Baiken is like love-hate. If you seriously play the game, she's like love-hate. Like if your character beats Baiken, like mine, I don't really care if she's in the game. I'm like, that's cool. Look at Baiken, she has an eye patch, that's kind of cool. If your character like struggles against Baiken, you really do not want her to be back in the game. But in all the regions besides Japan, people really want her to be back. The other funny thing about Baiken is that like she's pretty low. At my first glance, I'm like, is she even top 10? But she's there. The thing I'm shook by is that people actually want Elphelt to be back in the game, which is definitely sadness. I hope she does not return. But that is another example of me being a selfish Guilty Gear player. Elphelt destroys my character. She's super unfun to play against. But I'm sure there's some people who really want Elphelt back, who like her, who have fun playing her. This is a pretty common thing in the Guilty Gear scene. And it's something you'll definitely see in Strive as well. So here's a pretty important thing. So this is how the overall feedback was for what the game is, right? So they asked people for their comments on the battle system, how the game looks, how the characters animate, the music, the online lobbies, the HUD, and the matches. 1 is very bad and 5 is very good. If I had to recall, I think I rated the battle system like a 3, the visuals a 5, the animations a 5, the music 3 or 2, the lobbies I rated a 2, the HUD I rated a 2, and the online matches I rated a 3, personally, right? So let's go back. So the battle system, if you guys remember, I ended my thoughts on Strive beta thinking, you know, like this game is like just kind of mediocre. Like I see what they're doing. I won't lie and say I didn't have fun, because I did enjoy it, especially once I started getting a hang of it. And I'm also the type who likes exploring the systems of the game. So even if like your typical reaction, especially for like the more vocal population of the Guilty Gear community, you're just like, this isn't what we are used to, this sucks, right? I'm not the type to say this sucks immediately. I want to see why they are choosing to do what they do first, and then down the line I might be like, oh, you know what, this is actually okay, or like, oh, you know what, this really sucks down the line. After playing the entire beta, I just wasn't feeling it that much, but while I was actually playing it, it was kind of fun. So it was like a weird intersection for me there. I don't think anyone's gonna say anything about the visuals or animation. The game's gorgeous, especially once you play it in person. And this has been a really common thing at ArcSys games recently too. Like, you'll watch videos, you'll be like, oh, this is cool, but then you'll play it in person for the first time, and you'll be like just kind of like blown away. They get better at the visuals of the game with each game, right? The music was pretty sleep, I'm not gonna lie. In Exerd, I was not that big of a fan of the vocal tracks. I don't like the voices, you know, like a lot of my favorite tracks in Exerd are just like instrumentals or XX tracks, or they also had Isuka tracks too that were pretty sick. I'm not a really big fan of the vocals, so I got tired of like bullshit blazing and shit like pretty quickly. The lobbies, I think we all agree, were pretty trash. The HUD was not so great. Better than what I remember, but not so great. And the matches, if you only played the first beta, because there's 3 waves, a lot of people just gave up after the first wave. So if you're one of those people, you just thought it was absolute garbage. I couldn't get more than like 5 matches in an hour. But after that, it became like 1, playable, and 2, I could like get a good amount of games. So from here we come to what the devs have to say, and this is pretty much mostly addressing each of those things I talked about before, right? And here's the biggest thing. I zoomed in just so we can see it. Here's the biggest thing. This is where they start from, and this is where I start from, and this is where a lot of arguments happen. This game is not intended to be a continuation of previous titles. The basis of our development is to create everything to be completely new. I hope you can keep that in mind as you read on. It's hard to be like the type of fighting game player I am and have this discussion with people, because again, if you remember earlier, I said one of the things that I really enjoy about new fighting games, whether or not I actually end up liking them or not, like truly being like, I like this game, and this is a good game, which by the way, those are separate things to me. I've played games that I think are technically not good, which means like, you know, system reasons, like I think like this character does this to the game, or this system does this to the game, and there's a difference between that and like, I like this game and I think it's fun, or I don't like this game, I don't think it's fun. There are games that I don't think are fun that are pretty good games. There are games that I think are pretty bad games that I enjoy, right? So it's hard to be like that type of player and talk to like someone who's like a really rooted Guilty Gear player. Like, they want certain things and have certain expectations, and a lot of the main entries in Guilty Gear, of course, there's like weird stuff like Isuka, and there's like the Overture series, like stuff I didn't really play. Like the main competitive fighting game entries of Guilty Gear have been based off really Guilty Gear X and XX. So, and I've said this in pretty much every video about Strive. So the base that even Exert has been working with is basically like 20 years old, right? So now they're like, all right, let's try to shake it up, and this is one of the really big issues that people have with the game already. Even thinking back on like BlazBlue times, when BlazBlue dropped, like a lot of the reasons why, at least in my area, I can't speak for the entire world, but at least for where I'm from in the US and the US scene in general, a lot of the pushback against BlazBlue was that it just was different than Guilty Gear. This is pretty common in like established franchises like that. So 1, the damage is too high. So yeah, the damage is kind of high. I addressed this as well. The more I played, the less I worried about it, because I found that playing other like strong anime players, it was kind of hard to get like actual meaningful hits, you know, the way the system was made. But we also only did get to play for a total of 15 hours, right? So I think over time, like if everybody got to develop the game, the damage would actually be pretty high, and you could like realistically have like 2-touch kind of things, especially because of, you know, it's pretty easy to send characters to the corner. Like for example, Mei, you just, you know, use Dolphin sends flying to the corner, or like the corner push is pretty good in general. Now what they said is that they wanted to have the high damage as a baseline, and they want to adjust based off that, which I think is fine. Another thing that Daisuke mentions is that they want people to be able to deal a lot of damage without memorizing long combos. I feel like this has been slowly being shown in other Arc Sys games that have been coming out. So take Dragon Ball, for example. So, you know, there's optimizations to stuff that you could do, but basically everything does really similar levels of damage. And just because you learn something that's longer or harder doesn't mean it will do more damage. Like, the way you have to optimize is different because of how the damage value works. That sort of reminds me of this type of thing where they don't want specifically long combos to be the reason why you do a lot of damage. This is an old story, but back in BlazBlue CS1, one of the huge turnoffs for many people is that some characters had extremely long combos that did a lot of damage. I played one of these characters. I played Lychee. People used to joke about how you could like go get a sandwich during her combos and then come back and still wouldn't be done. And they did do a lot of damage on top of that. So I mean, of course, since then they've been adding and continuously adding new combo systems and new ways of like trimming the length of combos and how damage works. So it seems that they're still working on this, even in Strive. So there are fewer Gatling combo routes. So this is what I made a whole video about this, about why people hate the new Gatling combo routes. I'll link it in the description below as usual. Hopefully YouTube is cool and puts it in the suggestion box, but whatever. So my assumption was that they wanted to really specifically purpose each move and each chain, and that's why it's so limited. So the thing about Gatlings is like, okay, they give you a bunch, you know, whether or not it has a reason, it doesn't really matter, it's there. Down the line, you find reasons to use them. PKSHD is like, you know, your go-to like basic combo, magic series, whatever. This way feels weird because we're not used to it, but if you give it to somebody who's never played and you're like, this chain does this chain does this chain does this in a kind of simple way, it should, and I guess from their perspective, should make it easier for them to understand. I personally thought that the Gatling change was kind of weird at the start, but as I played some more, I actually thought it was okay. It's not personally something I really liked, but I kind of understand what they wanted to do and how to use it for my character at the time, May. So there's a few things here. So in this first comment, they talk about how in older Guilty Gear titles, Xrd, XX, etc., you had your traditional, what we're used to, right? They put restrictions on it, which we know. Now, the thing they start with is that it makes it difficult to use experience from previous titles to use in Strive, right? And a lot of people are upset about it. I actually didn't think of this as specifically, we want to, you know, restrain legacy skill a little bit. Like, once in a while, they add changes to games, or either in, like, a brand new game straight up. I think a mechanic like Super Dash is a great example of that. Or they do something like this, where it makes it so you don't need legacy skill to use this thing. I actually didn't think about that totally for the current Gatling system. So then they comment about a concept in this game is placing greater importance on choosing your moves based on the current situation. So they do have this thing about they really don't want you to get big combos from light starters. So like recognizing the situation and then choosing a different move to get like your higher return type of thing. That thing is actually pretty hard though. So you know, a lot of times in this type of like gaming article, like when you talk to the devs before a game comes out, they continuously reinforce that they want new players to get into it, and they say it here, right? Like, you know, there should be fewer mechanics for new players to learn before they can really enjoy playing matches. I will say there's a pretty big hurdle, and I'm being honest, like, I didn't really feel like I was playing GG for like 6 months. Some people are like, that's the cool part, but I'm like, you know, you don't want to gatekeep people out of it per se, but then having something like this where it's like the concept of recognizing the situation and doing a different choice is not a basic thing. That's like an advanced thing. Like when I play matches, like let's say on stream and stuff, I'm like, he didn't confirm the situation, and then like I hit them for something, a lot of times, especially new viewers to my stream, will be like, what do you mean by that? Like, it's not such a straightforward concept. So that's why I think their angle is a little bit weird still. So here they hit on a couple of other points. So, you know, there are also discussions in the scene about things like this, right? Like, what is more important, you know, like practicing training mode and playing, or just playing. And they want this to be a game that you could just learn by playing straight up. I do think that probably originally, like, if we actually got it, if they came out with Guilty Gear XX, like, tomorrow, instead of, like, Strive, right? The quick response would probably be like, they should just do that, right? But I actually have the perception that if that game came out tomorrow, first of all, a lot of us would think it would suck because it's extremely unrefined, right? We don't know how to play, we didn't develop the game, and it's not like balanced. So like they don't like know how to make the characters fit into the system well. If we play it today as it is, you know, in hindsight and stuff, there's a lot of things you have to learn and practice before you can like really play that well. But when the game came out, like you just basically had to sit there and play the game. And I think that's a really big thing they're trying to aim for here. Now they do talk about too how they want more freedom, and of course it sounds weird considering how the Gatlings work in this game, but I think they are, and they kind of mentioned this too. It's about how the combos work and how the juggles work, because it's you can kind of freestyle it. I think in the beta people came up with optimal beta combos, but in the end, like you could kind of just put stuff together, and as long as like the juggle worked, it would work, which was kind of nice. Okay, next, the camera. This was some real shit. So I really don't like the heavy counter hit. So there's two types of counter hits, right? I really wasn't a fan of the heavy counter hit. The light counter hit was just like the normal one, which is fine. So there's not much to say about this. It doesn't really have to do with the mechanics of the game, really, besides how the super counter hit freeze kind of like eats your inputs a little bit. Now they mentioned that they're just kind of experimenting and trying to do some new stuff. Some people got straight up motion sickness. I'm not one of them, but I could definitely see that. It is also just kind of jarring and takes you out of the game. That's what a lot of people mentioned too. Like, too much of that takes you out of the game. And an interesting thing is that Dragon Ball reduced and sped up all these things because it kind of slowed the game down. So if they want this game to be a fast game, they probably gotta lean towards that, I think. So next, the UI. So there's a lot of stuff to look at in the UI, right? You have the hearts. So what I like personally are the hearts. I do like the clock. It kind of grew on me. The things I don't like is the moving burst and the very small risk. The burst icon moves in order to minimize the amount of eye movement required to check the gauges. I think this is okay. This is probably another thing that, like, if you played fighting games a long time, the burst icon moving is like weird to you. But if you are newer, it makes more sense. I also saw people mention during the beta how like an arcade monitor is bigger, so having the burst icon move like that is nicer if they are going that route, which also makes sense. The one what I don't like is the risk gauge, and they said they made it less visible on purpose so that new players don't have to look at a lot of gauges, but it has to be visible. Like, it's way too important to the game. That really bothers me. It's way too important to the game for it to be that small. The way the game is right now. Of course, they mentioned that the damage is like their experimental damage, right? Like, just starting the damage of extreme and it'll tweak it. But, you know, risk affects the damage as well. It's way too important to have that be not easily visible. Especially because I don't know for sure in Strive, but usually in Guilty Gear, characters have different levels of risk. So, like, a character like Milia, it's easy to build up her risk gauge, but a character like Potemkin, it's hard to build up his risk gauge. So if you play a character who has an easy to build risk gauge, that means if you can't see it, you don't know when you're at the point where you're going to be dying. When your risk gauge is more than 50%, you're in a dangerous spot, right? Everything is counter hit. You could do stuff that you can't normally do in these situations. And I believe you also do more damage on top of that, and Strive has high damage already, so it needs to be visible. This one really bothers me. They said the hit counter is big because it's hard to see the number of hits due to be hidden by the character models. I don't even think the number of hits really matter that much. I think it's just a stylistic choice. I don't think it's that much of an issue, but it's not my game. Now, they said they're looking at the feedback though to see what they could do. I know basically everybody who played the game had something to say about the UI. Again, besides the Risk, I actually thought it basically did the job. I think the hearts and the timer were cool. I liked what they did with the tension gauge, but to me, the Burst and Risk were like no good. Okay, so next about the lobbies. So the lobbies had a bunch of issues during the beta. It was hard to even like set up matches. We memed about how we had to social distance just to get matches. Of course, there's the infamous Wave 1, Hour 1, nobody could get games. And then people were surprised that this was actually the lobby because they announced this on April 1st. They have been using for a long time this kind of arcade style, virtual arcade style lobby. Originally it started pixelated like this, but not like totally like this, but then eventually they started going with the 3D lobbies they use in like BB Tag, Guilty Gear Xrd, and also Dragon Ball Fighters. So this lobby is actually quite a bit different than basically all the lobbies they've done so far. So as far as the lobby system being buggy, I mean, this was kind of to be expected. It was a closed beta test. I was expecting things to not be working so well. During the Granblue beta test, there was a bunch of issues similarly connecting to people, getting into certain places, stuff like that. So we were pretty familiar with that. The big one, of course, was the way the lobby looks. And they're saying that they want to do new stuff that you couldn't do with the 3D avatars. I feel like there were things, so I remember in Xrd, there was like a soccer game, like a little mini game you could play in the lobby. I feel like there was stuff that you could do that they just didn't like really advertise that well. And then starting in like DBFZ, I can't speak for BB Tag, I didn't really play BB Tag online, but starting in DBFZ, they didn't really let you do those type of things in the open lobby. The last thing they talked about is the UI design, and this is like the general, like the character select screen, I think, how the health bars look, how the timer looks a little bit, the windscreen, stuff like that. So Guilty Gear, of course, you know, a lot of people associate with heavy metal and things like that. The image I got from things like the character select screen and the windscreen was more of like a cell phone game, if anything. Like some people used pop to be nice, but I just felt like it was a cell phone game. Like if you remember the character select screen, it had like the character's playstyle being like tricky or powered, stuff like that. It looked a lot different from all the prior Guilty Gear, just general menus, general UI in general. So they're like, don't worry, we're gonna make it look good. Okay, that's pretty much it. Again, I personally am not too worried about like UI stuff. I think those are all like relatively simple changes. Things like the lobby, like I get it because I played the beta. Hopefully they tighten that up. We'll see what they end up adding to that. I'm mostly concerned about like the actual game, and these are the complaints I take the most seriously, and the ones that, especially like my complaints, I take like pretty seriously. I don't really actually expect the first version of Strive to be like a good game. Their goal is just to make it like okay. Like if it's okay, that's a win. Most fighting games on their first release, they're not good. Like I played BlazBlue day one, not a good game, not gonna lie. Actually a pretty bad game. Funny game, not fun. Funny game, not good game, right? More popular game, right? Like SF5 when it dropped, everyone hated it, said it sucked. Now people still don't like it, but there are people who like it, you know. So their goal really should be to just get this to be like okay. I know there are a lot of people who like complain, and there's some people of course who complain and haven't tried it either. They've only just like been seeing stuff and they're like, oh, just make it for scouts, blah blah blah. I half want to say just keep on playing Xrd. That's usually what I say too. Like it's still there. All those games are there. Some people do that. But I've also been trying to be more fair too, because you know it is a really long-running franchise. People do really truly love the game like that, and they want this series to continue to be what it is, like what it is right now. I also am thinking, of course, of other regions in the world, right? Because not everybody is in a place where it's super easy to get games. Like you can drive an hour or two and get games. So things like the netcode being good. And the game itself being fun are extra important, because if the game is not good, then they don't really have a lot of options, right? So I just really hope that they do this the right way. It's why I pay attention to the system so much, and I make both the critiques that I have, because I do have a lot of critiques, like there's stuff I really don't like about the game, and I'm honest about the stuff that I do like and think they've done well, instead of just saying everything is shit from the beginning, because that's really disingenuous, and when you do that, you are literally saying you just want to keep on playing the same game. I like Exerd overall. I'll meme about not liking it, but you know, you gotta. I try to just be honest about what they have done so far, and I hope you know, they keep on listening to the fans and actually do what they say they're going to do and take the feedback seriously. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if you feel like it, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.